Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires, and to talk about the Empire in the endgame. I've spent plenty of time talking about the early game and each and every single one of the campaigns in the game. I do want to talk about the late game and how should you handle it if you're playing various factions. Though in this case I'm doing a combination of Karl, Franz, and Balthasar Gelt. Out of the two campaigns, I would say that Balthasar Gelt is the significantly better campaign. For one simple reason, Gelt will not really do much if he's under the control of the AI, whereas Karl Franz will do something, he will acquire territory, and so when you do confederate him, you're actually going to get something useful out of the subject. Whereas with Gelt, yeah, you would gain a province and a fort, maybe a couple regions otherwise, but that's pretty much it. Whereas Karl Franz, he's going to give you quite a lot, even though he's mostly going to give you the province of Reichland, but Reichland is going to be far better developed than Saarland would be under Balthasar Gelt. That's one benefit. The other benefit is hero capacity for battle wizards. Like, you get so much hero capacity when you're playing Gelt for battle wizards that realistically you could play the entire campaign and just get only one wizard's conclave and have enough battle wizards for every single one of your armies, or close enough to it. Like over here I have 10 armies, I only have 7 battle wizards. I should probably get more of them, but some of those armies are pretty far away from home, so to speak. Yeah, I mean, I've been spending quite a lot of time in this campaign. I mean, Gelt himself is way over here, and he doesn't have a battle wizard because, well, he is a battle wizard, so why would I bother with giving 2 mages in an army? Can be useful for different schools of magic, different opponents, but still. The more important thing is you get 10 armor for all armies, as well as having a better climate because you can take mountains, as opposed to Karl Franz, who doesn't have them as suitable climate. They are unpleasant, which does limit your potential in a campaign. Regardless of that situation, you can also confederate the Empire in itself as Volkmar, though that is a long-term prospect. But keep in mind something about Volkmar, which I've stated in his guide. You can take control of Imperial territory by doing the following thing. Volkmar's quest battles are going to be in the Empire itself, so it will grant you vision, and you don't have Imperial authority in his campaign, so you can just confederate these factions via regular diplomacy, and since Imperial factions do like one another, there is benefit in that particular campaign. Though there's also some downsides. You're going to be missing out on the Lord effects that you can get from the various elector counts over here. Though you're probably still going to get some of the elector counts just because, well, they're going to get them naturally still. Another thing to mention about Gelt is that you do get the elector count of Saarland, which gives you a local recruitment capacity to all armies from the very beginning of your campaign. And also a 5% upkeep benefit for crossbowmen and spearmen units in his armies, which is flat better than what Karl Franz gets with that 10% research rate, which is pointless for the Empire because you can get students as ancillaries, so that's going to boost your research rate by quite a lot. So yeah, I'm just going to say it. Also, furthermore, another reason to care about this is that the Eldred's Guard is much better than the Karlborg Greatswords. Okay, the Greatswords are good, don't get me wrong, but here's the thing. Having a Spearman with shield unit that has double the armor is not a minor thing. It is a very significant benefit in this particular campaign. So you're looking at, I mean, it's not double it is more than double armor if you're playing Karl Franz, but you're looking at 80 armor versus 40, and that's with the 10 armor benefit that Gelt does have faction-wide. So that is a thing. So out of the campaigns, I would say Gelt is better, though if you want to play a very long campaign as the Empire, Volkmar is also a good choice, though the early game is pretty crappy for Volkmar. Immediate threats in an Empire campaign for both Karl Franz and Gelt, for all of them really, if you're looking to take the Empire, are going to be Festus and Vlad. Those are the immediate threats, because those are the factions you are going to end up at war with. I mean, there's also Kazarak and all that, but Kazarak is an irrelevant faction. Beastmen just don't work really well right now. Now, out of the two issues, I always thought, like, when playing Karl Franz, you needed to deal with Festus as quickly as possible, but having played a lot of campaigns since then, I've come to this conclusion. Yes, Festus will take Hergig, he'll take Talabheim, he'll take Mindenheim, he'll take Wolfenburg. So you're going to lose 4 provincial capitals of the Empire, which is going to screw you over in terms of imperial authority. But he's not really going to accomplish much more than that. And so when you're playing an imperial campaign, the real threat is Vlad. The reason Vlad is the real threat is Vlad himself, like Vlad's armies are kind of pathetic. Like your basic armies can defeat him, those armies. Like that's something you should know. Like Kemmler is a bigger threat from my perspective than Festus is. But Kemmler doesn't have the raw power Vlad has. See, the thing about Vlad that makes him so annoying is Vlad, he will always come back. Like next turn, you kill him, he comes back. And he is quite capable of soloing a lot of armies, especially early game armies. So he is the principal threat. Medium term threats are Draika, Azag, if Azag wins against Zungrim, because they're going to clash with each other. But more often than not, what I see in campaigns on Legendary, and this is a Legendary very hard campaign, by default, without AI mods or anything like that, what happens is most of the time, Azag may win against Zungrim, but Draika then gets involved, and Draika then wipes out Azag. So between the two of them, more often than not, what happens is this province can end up being split freeway between Catherine, Ungrim, and Draika. Draika is nasty to deal with, to be certain, but one thing she shares with Festus, and this is the reason Festus is not that big of a threat, Vlad is, I mean, hell, even Kemmler is a bigger threat. Vampire counts will get a lot of armies. Warriors counts will have one really, really good army, and everything else would be irrelevant. Their garrisons are strong. Their principal army is strong. The one they start with, once you defeat them, it's a joke. Like, you can farm Bellicor for experience, knowing that. Because the way their unit recruitment system works, so they'll end up recruiting a bunch of crap units, because the AI doesn't have to handle the warband upgrade system well. Regardless, because they have limited armies, you can just overwhelm them with numbers. So Draika, yes, she's very scary if you fight her one-on-one, one army on one army, but she's not necessarily going to declare war on you unless you provoke her. Like, just ignore the Ostermark exists, except that it's going to be destroyed. Though in this case, the Ostermark, like, she has a tendency sometimes to leave Beckhaven alone, so yeah, just destroyed her in this campaign. And so Festus, like, if you're playing Gelt, Karl Franz will usually deal with him. That's what happened in this campaign. You might have to fight a couple of battles against him, but that's not really too big of an issue. If you're playing Karl Franz, I would ignore Festus for a while. Worry about Kemmler. Worry about Grom. That's also potentially a midterm threat, but it depends on what happens in Bretonnia, faction potential, all that. Like, there was a time when there were certain patches of certain AI behavior where Grom would be a big threat, or not really a big threat, he would just harass you, but nowadays he just kind of leaves you alone and he gets wiped out by Bretonnia. But it depends on what happens to Carcassonne. Like, basically, if Carcassonne is left alone by Ikeclaw and Mogr, Carcassonne with Orion will defeat Grom, basically. And it's like, yeah, Lewin is also going to intervene. Musalon is going to be wiped out if you can wipe them out quickly enough. Like, if you're playing Karl Franz, you might take Lyonesse, give that to Lewin, you know, get Grungs into. That's exactly what I did in this particular campaign. Baston as well, like, yeah, that can happen. Also, if you put enough pressure on Kemmler, the dwarves might wipe him out. Though it depends on how you handle that specifically. Long-term threats, let's talk about that. Like, the Bretonnian flank might be an issue. Like, the way you should view long-term threats is more about the flanks, the various geographic locations of the area. So, in the southwest, you might have Ikeclaw marching to Carcassonne, but you're going to have Orion slowing it down. You're going to have Durfu potentially slowing it down. The chances of, like, Ikeclaw actually marching on Helmgart is pretty damn low. So, like, if you deal with Kemmler quickly enough, this flank, this side of the border, which is secure behind these, like, forts, Helmgart and Fort Begray, it should not be an issue. Marienburg, take advantage of the fact that you can confederate them via diplomacy and the fact that Kemmler is likely to attack them. If Bretonnia attacks Marienburg, that's a different discussion, but most of the time I see Kemmler attacking. Like, I've played 2 separate campaigns back-to-back, and I've seen Marienburg being destroyed by Kemmler, not by Not by Bretonia. In fact, I can't remember the last time Bretonia took Marienburg. It can happen, but most of the time it's Kelmner the issue. As long as you ignore Kelmner until he does that, then you jump him after you've confederated Marienburg or they're weak enough for it. But like south of Fort Sol, you do have other issues. You do have Ekekla, but it depends on what happens in Belagar. In this particular campaign, he actually got wiped out. I triggered the revolt, but it does seem that his AI has become really passive after that. Like, I don't think he even has that much money. Like, I revived him quite a few turns ago, and it's like he doesn't even have that much money. So it's like it just feels like he got turned from a major faction into a minor faction. I'm not quite sure about that. Regardless, I took Skaven Blight, gave it to him. I had to sell this settlement to him, and then sell, Skaven Blight, which I took as tier 4 settlement. Yeah, having Wasteland not being pleasant climate is a downside in this particular campaign, especially because the Border Prince territory is not particularly great as a defensive network. Scrag is kind of like a mid to long-term threat. It depends on what he does. He may attack you, though more frequently as of late I've actually seen him go after Forgrim. Depends on what happens in that situation. He may go after you, he may not go after you. Like if you're playing as Gelt, or if you're playing the Empire, he might go after the Empire, he might not. He's not really an issue, especially if Belagar does well, because Belagar is stronger than all the Legendary Lords around it. He's stronger than Sartosa, he's stronger than Ikakla, he's stronger than Scrag. Well, under AI control, specifically on AI. It's very rare to see Belagar being destroyed, as it happened in this particular campaign, but it is something to bear in mind. Wood Elves typically will leave you alone. There was a point when Durfu might attack Nuln. Honestly, you should attack Nuln to try and take it out as quickly as possible. In one way or another. Or manipulate the system of Imperial Authority. Like what I did in this Gelt campaign. I took this element, sold it to Averheim, then I got the event for Imperial Authority, and I eventually got my fealty back up with Nuln, and I confederated them, and I got the Nuln Cannon Foundry, which is actually quite important, because it gives you the ability of recruiting pretty much all artillery units that you want, like Hellstorms, Great Cannons in particular. That's what you want. Hell Blasters are not really worth it that much. I mean, they can be nice, but yeah, you want Hellstorm rocket batteries, not Hell Blasters, from my perspective. Okay, so you have the situation of Scrag, Ikakla, Sartosa. Sartosa is a joke of a faction. You may have you may have Warzag attacking you as well from the south, from Fort Sol, basically the Fort Sol, Blackfire Pass direction, but more often than not, you're going to have Scrag. Ikakla, vast majority of times, Mogr stops them. But you do have some threats coming in from the south, so bear that in mind. From the east, not really. Like, I've never seen any faction invade the Empire from the mountains. Basically, it's more of a case like Vlad attacks Zufbar and conquers them most of the time. In this case, it didn't happen. Vlad took Stirland, but it can happen, so just bear in mind you might have to deal with him one way or another and deal with Azak. The long-term threats are really from the north. Basically, Wulfric, Trog, Frot, Azazel. Kislev is really bad at killing these factions. Like, they might kill Frot, but Trog and Azazel, very, very rarely have I seen that happen. And that is actually what you might have to invest significant resources in, as I have done over here. Like, I've got 2 full armies, and Gelt himself was in this particular area before I used the sea lane over here in the canal to send them down south through the Darklands to invade the jungle, because I'm going after Nurgle, because I can take jungle, it's suitable climate. Like, one of the things that the Empire is, there's not really... there's only certain sections of the map that are suitable, so it's basically jungle. Like, yeah, I'm invading Gorst and Kugaf, basically, and maybe Greases, though in this case it seems Greases is finished, so it's just going to be Gorst and Kugaf in this particular campaign. But it is this front line over here between Kislev and Erengrad that might be the place where you have to devote a significant amount of resources to help Kislev out. Now, it could happen that Catherine does end up in a strong position. Not necessarily dominant, but she holds the line. In which case, you may not necessarily want to devote too many resources, but keep in mind something. Ostland is vulnerable to attack by Norskans. I would say invading, fully conquering Norska is probably not worth it, but you can defeat Wulfric's army, take some of his territory, beat the crap out of him, and then get a peace treaty with him. He'll leave you alone for a while, and when he does poke his face, like, just send a full stack, take one of his territories, like one of these provinces or a provincial capital, and just get the peace treaty with him. Be'lakor is annoying, especially with the wasteland, but I would not consider Be'lakor so much of a threat as I would consider Be'lakor a freaking nuisance in a campaign. That's my perspective. Like, if you're playing any campaign that shares a border with Be'lakor, be it a High Elf campaign, a Norscan campaign, an Alifanar campaign, a Hellebron campaign, chances are you're going to deal with this annoying lord. And I say annoying because Be'lakor will just invade via the sea with one army that you can auto-resolve against if you have a garrison backing you up most of the time. I do this in virtually every campaign that shares a border with him. It's trickier as the Empire because you just don't have the greatest armies in the world, but it can be done. Just keep in mind, if you share a border with Be'lakor, you are going to have to devote maybe an entire stack towards dealing with him one way or another. Wulfric is actually the bigger danger because he actually has multiple armies that he'll invade. Like, you can pretty much expect that Norland will be destroyed by Wulfric in every campaign, so expect the fact that you're going to lose Imperial authority. It's not worth invading Norska. It's more so hopefully the case that Kislev will eventually get their shit together and deal with the problem long term. But yeah, funnily enough though, if you're playing a Gelt campaign, you can actually take the Kraka-Drak as suitable climate, because yeah, the port here will not be suitable, sure. But Kraka-Drak itself, the lair of the Troll King, that's suitable, and you can just basically put the pressure on Trog. But it depends on what happens. Like, in this case, like, Kislev fell. Like, every city that Kislev fell. Like, Catherine was down to Igorov, and it's like I had to intervene with 3 full stacks to save her hide. Because she was just gonna... Like, the Skaven were about to invade from Hellpit, full-on invasion into the Empire. And even now, like, I beat Trog, got the peace treaty, and even now, Catherine's still getting her ass kicked. It's probably faction potential, really, that's biting her. Though, hilariously enough, like, obviously you shouldn't ignore Archeon, because he's also an issue, though Archeon invading that far south, if he's going through Kislev to invade you, you've got bigger problems. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a campaign where Archeon just invades on his own. No, he will, sure, he might send an army, 2 armies, but it's more the combination of Norscan, Skaven, and Archeon that's going to be an issue, because most of the time Boris Ursus ends up losing. Though in this case, I triggered the war between him and Gremgor, and he's winning. And this is not a weak Gremgor. This is a Gremgor it's like he's been at war with Tsar Nagrund. And it's like he took one of their territories over here, and it's like hilarious. And it's like Boris Ursus shows up with a stack and just starts beating the... Like, this is actually his starting army, and it's like ridiculously good. Like, it's because this army that Boris Ursus has is so good in auto-resolve if he can keep it alive. Like, he might lose it against Archeon, but if he can keep it alive, like, very few armies can stop that. And it's like, this... What's happening here is like, yeah, he's at war with Astrogov, so is Ungrim. Don't underestimate your Ungrim. Like, that's the thing. Like, Ungrim may have issues against Azag early on, but if he survives that situation, he's gonna defeat pretty much every faction that stands against him. Like, because Dwarven stacks under the AI control, pretty damn powerful. So your eastern flank is secure. Your north and southern flanks are the issue. If you want to help anyone, if you're concerned about helping any dwarf beyond Ungrim, like, the bigger concern, the one that might require you more resources, is actually Thorgrim, because Thorgrim can end up under an enormous amount of pressure, which he actually did in this campaign because Scrag attacked him, and I had to intervene. I haven't fought Clan Moors, but I did fight Warsack, so just keep that in mind. And Skarsnik is... in control of Caracate Peaks, which is fun, and Clan Moors is like invading with multiple stacks, so it does seem like Thorgrim at this point is going to be able to win against us. But you've also got Tretch. Just this entire area, like, it's ideal if you control Akendorf, but just remember you have Blackfire Pass as a choke point and you have Fort Sol as a choke point, but it is ideal if you have the dwarves holding this line for you, like basically between Belagar and Thorgrim, so you can focus on other things. And what things should you focus on? Well, Camry and Arabia are prime locations. Like, for whatever reason, it seems like Kairos has gone on a super powerful campaign where he's ranked 2, and weirdly enough, Axial is actually still alive in this campaign, so it's like, wow, Kairos. I mean, he certainly has defeated tech list in this campaign, and he's got like multiple armies over here, but then again, so does Volkmar. It's like, you generally don't expect the war for Camry to end up being a brawl between the Empire and Kairos Fateweaver of all things. Okay. Long-term prospects for expansion, you've got Camry, you've got Araby, you've got Lustria. Lustria is a good choice because with the addition of Jan Bo, more often than not, Marcus Wolfart will stay alive and he's worth confederating. Okay, that's territorial concerns. What should you do in terms of settlement buildings and in terms of army recruitment? Well, with settlements, it's a balance between unit recruitment, economy, and of course, hero recruitment. Though with the Empire, I would say increasing hero capacity is one of your main priorities. Now, economic, like you want to get fields to get your growth. You only need 1 tap room in a settlement to prevent rebellions. Because like with 1 tap room, and this is, keep in mind, this is with the difficulty modifier on, you're going to get minus 12 control, right? But with 1 tap room, you do have for control from a commandment they can use, and it's like basically with 1 tap rune, and you might not even need it. With that, you're looking at getting +6 from a tavern or a tap rune room if you get it in a minor settlement. And Gotrek and Felix can spawn, which are pretty useful. Like in this case, actually, Gotrek and Felix are under Boris Ursus's control for whatever reason. But still, when it comes to economy, it's pretty simple. You want to get, obviously, Taylor's Guild. You want to get growth. You want to get one single control building is enough to prevent rebellions. And if you're focusing on entire province on economic potential, then yeah, paved roads in every settlement in a province will maximize your profit. Though, of course, there's the unit recruitment situation and the hero capacity argument to be had. The problem with Imperial unit recruitment is you need multiple buildings to recruit units. So if you want to recruit things like great swords, you need an armory, so that's an extra structure. In a province like Reichland, that's not too big of a deal, but in other provinces it is, because you have plenty of provinces in the Empire that are either 2 or 3 regions. And that means you're going to have to make some choices. Like, it's good to focus Dragunov on economic development once you've taken it, because, well, you're in hero capacity, because you're probably not going to come back here unless there's an endgame crisis, and same with Northern Sylvania. Like, the center of the Empire should be your economic breadbasket, that's the outer regions, and Reichland, which should be for unit recruitment. And, of course, hero capacity in every province as much as you can. Now, wizards are not too big of an issue. This is going to tie into research, however. But still, when it comes to unit recruitment, early on in a campaign, actually, let's start with Lord recruitment. You have 3 Lord choices: Arch-Electors, Generals, and Huntsmen. The only one that's really worth focusing on are, and I might have to turn off some of these buildings that I am building here. The only one that's really worth focusing on is Arch-Electors. To explain that, you need to understand this. Arch-Electors have Grand Soulfire, Grand Shield, and Grand Hammer of Sigmar. These are not spells, they're cooldown abilities. You can use them continuously throughout the battle. This is especially great with Volkmar because, yeah, it's a battle prayer cooldown. So these battle prayers, very, very useful. You can throw an Arch-Elector into the middle of an entire army and they'll survive the damage they're taking, because they have various abilities that reduce the damage they're taking. Like, they're the lore choice of a warrior priest. Now, warrior priests have the same ability, not quite the same level of power, but the point is, but when we're looking at this situation, like warrior priests and arch-electors are really good. You can mass them and make armies just of them. Now, generals of the Empire, well, I'm not even going to recruit one because I have Boris, who's basically the same damn thing. They can be good melee combatants, they can have good mount options, sure, with flexibility flying, but Arch-Electors, vast majority of time, are better. Like, of all the lords that I have, I don't have anything other than Arch-Lectors right now leading my armies. Like, all of my leaders, all of my Electric Counts are Arch-Lectors. It's not worth getting anything. The one trait, because they all have like the same traits, the one trait that's really good though is Noble, because construction time and income from all buildings is pretty damn useful in an Imperial campaign. You don't have the worst construction time, but still. And then finally you do have Huntsman General. Like, Huntsman Generals are kind of useless in battle, but they do give you things like Survival Expert, Experienced Hunter, and Circle of Protection. So that is useful for the sake of buffing your unit. So if you're looking at a lore choice that's buffing the army but not necessarily so great in combat, I mean, they can do range damage, but the problem with ranged heroes and lords is that doesn't work very well. In terms of unit recruitment, by default, what you want to recruit are archers. At tier 1, that's what you want to recruit. If you don't have the Marcus Wolfhard DLC, Free Company of Militia. If you don't have that DLC, which is for Volkmar, then swordsman. But honestly, if you don't own both Imperial DLCs, I would probably say the Empire is not worth playing right now in this state. It's just that kind of situation that we have right now with the Empire. You want the Regiments Renown, for instance, because they're going to be pretty damn good. But Regiments Renown most of the time should be used to either supplement something that's critically missing, like for instance I gave this army artillery for Regiments Renown and some cavalry, or they should be used for emergency army recruitment. In terms of your typical recruitment, at tier 1, archers, as I said. At tier 2, you want, let's say, 2 to 4 spearmen with shields, and everything else crossbowmen. Don't bother with anything else, any other unit. At tier 3, if you can get an armory, then yes, a combination of greatswords and huntsmen is the ideal one. Now, huntsmen are more expensive than crossbowmen, but here's the thing, and they don't have the same armor piercing. Sure, but the important thing is they can fire while moving and they have vanguard deployment. That is pretty damn useful. And while they're more expensive, they're the much better unit to have in a campaign. And that anti-large may not necessarily be as good, but they have a lot of flexibility that crossbowmen just flat don't have in a battle. They're also faster, so that helps them with, skirmishing tactics. Greatsword is pretty decent enough infantry unit to have, but you may skip recruiting greatswords because one of the things you can do is just rely on melee heroes. You'll have a lot of melee heroes in an Imperial campaign. Long-term prospects, in terms of long-term army, well, it would look something like Toddy has over here. So a bunch of huntsmen with some electric count state troopers, a couple of Hellstorm rocket batteries, grand cannons, and some cavalry. Though in this case I don't have cavalry because cavalry is tier 4. Like, you don't want to necessarily bother with a lot of the cavalry because you want to focus the building slots on increasing your economy and hero capacity. And so, like, getting the livery, like, I would not bother with it until I'm close to tier 4. The reason is, like, Imperial Knights, they're decent, but you're going to have a lot of sieges, in particular in the Empire. One unit of Pistoliers or one unit of Outriders, good, but there's other ways of getting skirmish or cavalry, especially for state troopers. So not particularly too important. Knights of Blazing Sun are good, but they're too expensive unless you own Taliban. Yes, I do have some. Like, I recruited 2 of them just for the sake of it, but yeah, they're pretty damn expensive to recruit in a campaign. And the key to success in a campaign is scalability, is getting as many armies as possible. So, Archer Army Tier 1, Crossbow Spearman Shield Army Tier 2, and Tier 3 Greatswords, Huntsmen. Maybe keep some Spearmen with Shields, like 4 Crossbowmen, 4 Greatswords, 2 Spearmen with Shield for Frankfurt protection. Don't bother with halberdiers because halberdiers, they're not great. They'll take a lot of damage in auto-resolve, and they require you to get to get the blacksmith, which you can avoid. Like, that's the problem with Imperial Knights. You gotta get the blacksmith. So all you're getting from the livery at tier 2 is just pistoliers. Don't bother with that. Like, that's the thing though about like Spearman Shields. They don't require the blacksmith, and they'll do better in auto-resolve. They won't do quite as well as in melee because they don't have armor piercing, but you're not relying on halberdiers for the sake of winning melee fights. You're relying on them for holding the flank. And Spearman Shields can do that job just as well as they do. There's some stat differences, but yeah, Spearman Shield is just a better unit to recruit because they can resist range damage and do better on auto-resolve for whatever reason. And you do want to get barracks at tier 3 for captain capacity. And cavalry-wise, like, yeah, demigriffs. Specifically, demigriffs knights with halberds. They don't have the same kind of charge bonus or bronze shields, but they have anti-large and armor piercing, whereas regular demigriff knights only have armor piercing. I mean, both choices are good, but I prefer the halberd version. Like, cavalry, you know, they're fast-moving enough that they won't necessarily get demolished by range units, so... yeah, demigriffs are a good choice. Reichsguard are good for Karl Franz because he gets various benefits for them. But if you're getting cavalry, like 2 to 4 demigriff knights per army, I'd say 2 most of the time. You can make a melee cavalry army work quite well for the Empire and just get rid of huntsmen if you want to. There's various reasons why you may not want a ranged army. One big problem is getting artillery. Because outside of Nuln, you can't get artillery at tier 3, except mortars. Most of the time in an Imperial campaign, you're looking to get tier 4 for Hellstorms and Great Cannons, and that's one of the reasons Nuln is so important in an Imperial campaign. Hero capacity-wise, here's the thing. You can increase Warrior Priest capacity at tier 3 and Captain capacity at tier 3. And mages get 1 capacity for the Wizard's Conclave, but you get a bunch of capacity if you're playing Gelt, and there's also a research benefit over here for Imperial University to increase capacity for Battle Wizards and Imperial Captains. Then you also have the Clergy of Sigmar, so you're looking at recruit rank benefits over here. Witch Hunters can only be increased capacity at tier 4, but they're pretty strong. Actually, they're not strong in terms of like their combat prowess. They're strong from 2 other perspectives, however. They do 2 things. One, they have the accusation ability, which can be used against an enemy lord or a big single entity to really reduce their capability. This is important because the Empire doesn't really have great duelists. So 1 Witch Hunter in an army will help you with that. The other thing is that they have post-battle loot benefits, so having Witch Hunters, even if you will have far fewer Witch Hunters than Warrior Priest Mages or Captains, they're still worth getting. Like, I would get, like, what I would do in a province, like, beyond the economic buildings, resource buildings, all that, I would get a bunch of Shrines of Sigmar and minor settlements, and then get, and Captain capacity barracks as well, though you don't necessarily need too many Captains, because, like, Warrior Priests are just the better hero choice, flat. Like, as a melee hero, like, yeah, Warrior Priests far better than Captains. So Captains do have flying mounts, whereas Warrior Priests don't. Keep that aspect in mind. As for Ulrika, I'm just going to mention this. I couldn't care less about her. I don't think she's really worth the effort, because you have to build a wall, and it takes time. Like, yeah, I did it over here in Sartosa when I took it over, but most of the time, like, she's not really worth focusing too much on. It is nice to get her eventually, just not necessarily something to worry about too quickly. So that's kind of your army situation. You could just make doom stacks of, like, Warrior Priests instead of bothering with any kind of unit recruitment capacity. Like, once you start getting, like, you could just focus on tier 2 recruitment, and then at tier 3, once you get there, just get Warrior Priests, Warrior Priests, Warrior Priests, and Mages. Personally, I do prefer actually having an army as opposed to the masses of Warrior Priests until you get to Long Victory, and then things change, because you're not going to be recruiting Warrior Priests at rank 11, no. You're going to be recruiting Warrior Priests at, what, rank 14? Like, okay. You get +3 from research, so you're looking at rank 4, so yeah, rank 14. And you can go even higher than that, because you can build the Shrine of Sigmar, the Temple of Sigmar, in a provincial capital. So if you're getting this in a provincial capital, and you're getting to tier 5, you're looking at rank 18 Warrior Priests. Which, yeah, that's pretty damn good. Like, if you can flat out recruit rank 18 Warrior Priests, that is amazing and great. The reason for that is if we look, and keep in mind they can get Regal as well as Noble. I think it is, like, yeah, let me just check the wizards if I have any. So you can get Noble for heroes as well. But if we look at Warrior Priests, the reason rank 18 is so useful is, like, you would have at rank 15, you would get Soulfire, right? So even if you were recruiting them at rank, so you could just recruit them from a tier 4 settlement, but importantly, you'd get a lot of melee capability with them, and you'd get all of these spells, all of these, well, not spells, these abilities with a cooldown, and you'd be able to get them unlocked. There's a strong argument to be made in Legend of Total War, for instance, as used just like warrior priest armies, as opposed to just like recruiting any unit. So yeah, the Empire roster is not particularly strong. Like, that's the thing, like, get the swarm of warrior priests and smite them with the power of Sigmar. Like, seriously, it's no joke. It is strong, and these guys are actually cheaper than recruiting proper units that, like, compared to many units at that cost that these guys require, it's like, yeah, these guys can be strong. Though, of course, there's going to be a limit to how many warrior priests you can maintain. Still, most of your campaign, the crucial parts of the campaign, will be done with crossbowmen, spearmen with shields, in the early game, early to mid game, early on, very early on, archers. And that's kind of it. Costine signing out. Research-wise, just to mention this, like, one thing to note here is your victory conditions in 3 of the Imperial campaigns, including Volkmar, including so Karl, Franz, Gelt, and Volkmar, they require you to take the entire empire, which is pretty annoying because of Imperial Authority. One thing to understand, Imperial Authority is not some... fealty, specifically. You want to get fealty for these electric counts to 10 quickly. That means cheesing settlements, so one of the things you can do is, like, take a territory, sell it to a faction, or... And sell it to a faction for one of these minor factions to get involved in one of your wars, or if they're not already, or just take a territory, then leave the faction to the enemies, and just increase fealty, like, do some flipping of settlements to increase Imperial Authority, because right now, for instance, it's turn 67, and while I'm waiting for the Hochland event to pop off, I'm still waiting on RNG over here with Ostermark and Averland. I probably, to achieve a long campaign victory, which is pretty annoying. Sure, I could declare war, but it would hurt me in other ways. All the same. So just bear in mind that with fealty, you do want to increase it throughout the campaign, like deliberately screwing yourself, slowing your campaign pace to increase fealty. Oh well. It is a bit annoying, to be certain, with Averheim in particular, because they only have 2 settlements that count as being part of them, so that's frustrating. So I guess I'll just wipe them out eventually. Like, once I've confederated Hochland and Ostermark, I'll probably just build 2 armies and wipe them out. Regardless. Research-wise, remember you can get students which are an ancillary for your heroes. So if we look at some heroes, I think this one... no, actually, I think I may have... like, I'm really poor at hero and lord management. There's so much shit over here. But students, when you fight the battle, after, like, let's say you're now you finish researching something. The turn you finish researching something, you can fight battle and you have a chance of getting students. There's a lot of them. They each increase your research rate, and you add so much your capacity that you'll be getting a lot of students and you'll increase your research rate. Research-wise, one of the things I'd start with is tight rebates for that growth and control. So you get 2 control faction-wide from this alone. And what you want to get is Clergy of Sigmar for the hero core rank for Witch Hunters and Warrior Priests. And then you want to get Imperial University, Assembly Lines, Imperial University. After that, long-term factor, Manors for Lord Recruit rank, and then Imperial Architects for construction time. After that, you can go whatever you want. Like, over here I got Emissary of Altor, so I'm looking at free control from the research tree alone. And then I'm working on the Runefang Pact, which does require you to control Altor, so just keep that in mind. But it is going to increase my fealty +1 with these factions. Other things you can, of course, take are, volley fire for reload time reduction and ammunition. The ammunition is more important than anything else, I would argue. But a lot of the, like, military stuff just doesn't really feel that great. Okay, like state-issued infantry armor, absolutely, but I'd rather focus on, construction time and hero recruit rank and all that, and leave this for, like, the long-term benefit. That's my personal perspective over here with this, though, state armor, 15 armor is not something to sneeze at, so that's useful, as well as things like, reload time reduction and ammunition. That's pretty useful, but a lot of this stuff it's not bad, it's just, like, it's not particularly exciting to focus on. That's my perspective. Costine signing out, stay tuned for more.